All right, well, you know what's not debatable? How good of a story this Sons of Ben story is. So let's talk here about the Sons of Ben. So imagine you are someone who is a massive supporter of a sports team to the point where you're making merchandise and trying to convince many other people to join you in rooting for this team. Weirdly, though, people look at you like you're insane and tell you that you're crazy. I mean, why is that? Well, that's because this team that you're supporting doesn't exist. That's what happened with the Sons of Ben, a Philadelphia Union supporters group that existed for longer than the team has existed. And today we're going to tell you about their story. So the story will start when the Sons of Ben wasn't even an idea yet. As much as it pains me to say, as a New York sports fan myself, Philadelphia is a city known for their sports love and also for being a-holes, if we're being honest. But that's besides the point. In the late 2000s, they already had a thriving sports scene with four major sports teams in the area: the Eagles for football, the 76ers for basketball, the Flyers for hockey, and the Phillies for baseball. Considering all of that, it was very easy for soccer to get pushed to the wayside with so many other options to gravitate towards. However, that was not the case for all. And those same people began to find one another online in different soccer forums and communities. One of the major things all of these people bonded over was not having a voice in the soccer community. And one day they decided they were going to change that. They decided they were going to meet up at McGillen's Old Ale House in Philly. And in that ale house is where the Sons of Ben was born, to try and make their voice heard about wanting to bring a MLS franchise to Philadelphia. The name of the supporters group, the Sons of Ben, is paying homage to Benjamin Franklin, who I hopefully don't have to tell you about, but is a major figure in the history of Philadelphia. They continued to build the brand by making a logo as well, with a lot of references to Ben and also the city of Philly in the logo. To top it all off, as if it were fate, the URL for Sons of Ben actually became available just 2 days before this project began to take off. The group started small with maybe about 8 to 10 people who were very dedicated to growing both this group and getting more attention on the city getting an MLS side. But despite the small numbers, they put in a big effort. This included them spending their own money to make scarves, shirts, magnets, and more to help market the group and get people involved. In the documentary, they talked about specifically for the magnets how they would give two out to each person they marketed towards. That way, they can keep one for themselves and they could use the other one in a more public space to help get even more eyes on the group. They were super dedicated to getting their name out as much as possible. So they would show up to event after event and continue to cheer for this team that did not exist. Some of the events included going to New York soccer games and even showing up to the MLS draft. Sons of Ben was able to catch some fortunate breaks when it came to their marketing strategies. One of which was being interviewed on live TV at an indoor soccer match in Philadelphia. In fact, there was even one supporter in the documentary who said they heard about Sons of Ben through seeing them on TV. However, there was still low turnout to Sons of Ben events, despite all their money and their efforts thus far. Another one of their big breaks came with spotlights in some big sports magazines, such as Sports Illustrated and 442, the latter of which caught the attention of Nick Sakovic, who would later become a very crucial part of the process of getting a team to Philly. Another one of their major breaks was their influence at the 2007 MLS Cup final in DC. They showed up to the Cup with about 90 people, even though they had no team nor rooting interest in this final. Their only mission was to make themselves heard. Fortunate for them, when the group arrived, DC security at the Cup wanted a parade of different teams coming through, different team supporters. So someone from the group went up to security and said that they were there for the Philadelphia team. Security, having no idea what teams were actually in the league, went along with it. And so the Sons of Ben got to march in with the other fans while they were chanting for a non existent team. Eventually, they made their way to the stands where they did not stop chanting for Philadelphia, to the point where the other team's supporters in the stands began to give them dirty looks and throw harsh words their direction. But Sons of Ben was not deterred. In the documentary, they show a clip of from the national TV broadcast, and at one point, when Houston is going to take a corner, in the stands you could see a sea of light blue, where the Sons of Ben were making their presence known. And again, Nick Sakovic took notice of them. Eventually, all of this noise began to pay off as the county pledged to offer 30 million in bonds to help raise money for a soccer-specific stadium to be built for a potential Philadelphia team. There was a big looming question when this news broke, though. Where were they going to build the stadium? For those unfamiliar with the other Philadelphia sports, most, if not all, of their stadiums are right next to each other in one location. So it would definitely be very different for them to have to move somewhere else. Or were they going to group them in with the other stadiums? Well, one of the rumored areas was Chester, which at the time was known for its high crime rates. So many people were questioning why was this one of the rumored places? This may stop people from wanting to travel to games. And also considering the fact that it's 15 miles outside of Philadelphia. Well, the Sons of Ben were just happy they'd have anywhere they could watch a team play. And they even embraced the stadium being in Chester by beginning a charity called Help Kick Hunger, where they would raise money and collect food to help feed those in Chester. And while they were able to check off the box of finding a place to play, they did have another major issue. And it was that there was a $47 million gap in funding for the new stadium. And without that money, they weren't going to be able to start building it. One of the places that people turned to potentially get this money from was the state of Pennsylvania. So Sons of Ben did what they do best, and they made their voice heard. They traveled around everywhere in Philly, collecting signatures of support for the team to help show that there was a group of people that would support this project. Eventually, they were able to turn over a petition signed by 7,000 people to Governor Pileggi to try and get the extra funding that they needed, and ultimately, it did work. And not only did it work, but the governor says in the documentary that the Sons of Ben's existence was a major factor in showing that there would be a strong support for a team here, which gave him more assurance to be able to provide this money. So, following this, Nick eventually sits down with the governor to talk about beginning the construction for the stadium. And the governor only agreed to it if it were going to be in a struggling area. That way, it could potentially be a way to bring life back into the area, which lent more backing to Chester being the location for the stadium. The last hurdle before construction could presumably begin was that the governor would only give the green light if MLS agreed to add Philly as an expansion team, which created what had to feel like the longest waiting game of all time for Sons of Ben members. The rumor was that MLS was going to add three expansion sides, and in 2008 and 2009, San Jose and Seattle respectively joined the league, leaving only one place left. Otherwise, everything they worked so hard for might be dead. The biggest players for that 2010 spot were Philly and St. Louis, and St. Louis was looking like a very formidable threat to take this spot. And they even copied the Sons of Ben by making their own supporters group for a non-existent team. Then one day, Brian James, head of Sons of Ben, gets a call from Nick, and he asks him and the Sons of Ben to meet him at a bar so he could deliver some important news. And it was at this bar that he essentially drops the news that Philly is going to be the 16th team to join Major League Soccer. The announcement was held in a work building in Chester on February 28th, 2008, where Daddy Don dropped the official news that Philly would be joining the league in 2010. And while he's making the announcement, over to his right is a group of Sons of Ben members in all of their gear with smiles ear to ear, finally seeing the fruits of their labor. Right when everything was at its highest point for Philly and the Sons of Ben, of course, there had to be one last hurdle in the shape of the economic recession. When the recession hit, there were a lot of questions and a lot of concern about whether they would actually have the money needed to start the construction of the stadium. Add to this the fact that there was a rumor that Don was meeting with the Barcelona owners about a potential team in Miami. And now you've got a lot of people in Philly nervous about their expansion ticket potentially being taken away. Another major impact of the recession had to do with the revitalization plan for the city of Chester. Originally, with the plans to build the new stadium, there were also plans to build new restaurants, create more jobs, and also completely change the whole waterfront. But according to the documentary, this never happened due to the recession, which was a major letdown. And quite frankly, a betrayal to the people of Chester, who were hoping this could be a huge moment to turn things around and get people in the city to get themselves on the right track. Instead, now the city's stuck in the cycle of poverty and violence, while others who were better off get to go to the new stadium for the day and then leave right after without actually being able to support the surrounding area. Well, 6 months roll by, and the markets begin to open up again. And with it begins the construction of the stadium, thanks to a big push by Nick. And on June 27th, 2010, the Philadelphia Union, a professional soccer team for the city of Philadelphia, finally plays its first game, with the forever faithful Sons of Ben in the stadium cheering for a real team, their real team.